world. Right. So, Dean, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself? And we're hoping others will introduce themselves in the chat as well. Tell us what your role is from where you come from.
Yeah, please do that. Just let us know a little bit more about who you are. My name is Dean, and as I said, I come to you from Treaty 4. That's the original lands of the Cree, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Nakota, Lakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. So we respect and honor the treaties that were made on those territories, and certainly, as Brenda said, acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and committed to moving forward in the spirit of truth and reconciliation. My background is an elementary school teacher. That's how I got started. Did that for 15 years and worked very closely. Then, as I moved into a district position in technology, supporting technology, and about a decade ago, left the public system to work. I worked with Discovery Education for 8 years, and for the past couple of years have been working with Advanced Learning Partnerships, supporting the work not only here in Canada but in the U.S. as well. My colleague Craig is joining us from South Carolina, who does very, very similar work to Brenda and myself.
Right, thanks, Dean. And I'm also a consultant with Advanced Learning Partnerships. So I've just rewired, I don't say retired, but I've left my district where I spent 32 years in public education. So I was 20 years as a classroom teacher in a regular classroom and special education. And then I spent about 6 years as a technology instructional coach with Upper Grand District here in Guelph. And then I've spent a couple of years as a vice principal and a couple of years as a education officer with the Ministry of Education in the 21st Century Learning Unit, and teaching AQ courses here at Wilfrid Laurier University, and involved in a lot of teacher PD. So I'm really grateful to have that opportunity to do that with Craig and Dean and Katina and others from Advanced Learning Partnerships. I also neglected to mention that the Whose Land app that we showed on the land acknowledgement slide is a really good resource for you. If you're ever wondering what territory you're on, you can use that interactive app on your phone, or as a resource for helping students learn why we acknowledge the land, and maybe some interesting ways to do so with video as well.
So we're so fortunate that Katina is here, and so you see OECM, you see Advanced Learning Partnerships, and Dell, and I'm just going to introduce Katina for a moment and let her just shine a little bit of light on why and how we all got together here in the first place, and how this is even happening. Welcome, Katina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katina, and I'm the education strategist for Dell Technologies. I work very closely with the ALP team. They are wonderful. And yes, Dell Technologies is a computer manufacturer, but we are also very invested in supporting a whole solution to support our students. My role specifically is to focus on student-centered learning and how technology can amplify that learning. And the best way to help our students receive that student-centered learning is to support our educators. So working with OECM, we've been able to create this incredible professional learning opportunity for all of you. And we hope that you enjoy it. We hope you find it very useful and practical for your practice within the classroom or on virtual space. As well, please let your colleagues know that it is available until January. So lots to come, and just really excited by the great content and our amazing facilitators. So thank you, Brenda and Dean, and we'll keep moving forward.
Yeah. You also have something else to give us, Katina. What else can we?
Oh, that's right. At the end, I will be doing some prizes. So always excited to give things away, because yes, thank you for giving your time. And this is still your summer holidays. I know it's the last days before going back to school. So thank you for being here. And we will do a spin the wheel at the end. So stay tuned, and I'll turn off now.
And I will drop, I'm going to find it here because I'm going to use the same form I used yesterday. I'll drop a little form in the chat for that Katina will use. I can't find it now. I'll find it real quickly. And simply, once you see that in the chat, if you want to get a prize, you just have to put your name and your email address in there. And oh, look, it's already there. Oh, and that's the links to the sessions. Is that the link to the forum?
I just put the forms one in.
Oh, there it is.
There you go.
Good, perfect. That's all we need. Then I don't have to look for it. Perfect. All right, a little more in the preliminaries. So in ALP, I guess we're very proud of the way in which we approach the work that we do, and these are our values. And so we hope that even through our time together, that you'll see these manifested in some way, shape, or form. And you can see that all of them begin with the word together, and the fact that we don't come to you simply as providing a service, but we do believe in the idea of partnership. So we hope that means that you are going to engage with us in all kinds of ways. And I know Brenda and I will give you lots of opportunities, not only in this session to contribute, but certainly as you think about the other sessions that are offered, ways that you can work together, and again, through trust and the way we cherish people. We are, when we say we're grateful for you here, we are so grateful for that, and understand that we're pretty blessed to have this opportunity. So anyway, that's that. It's time to sort of try to get moving into the work here. A couple more things I think, Brenda, you can just share around how we're going to operate together as a group.
Right. So we really want to invite your participation during our collaboration today, either in the chat or grab the mic. We're a small group, so let's leverage that because then we can have really good conversation. Here are a few of the agreements that we hold as important for our professional work together. So if there are others that we may have left out, please add them in the chat, and we can have a consistent thinking about how we'll be working together today. And I know we've all had probably our share of experience on Zoom, but if it's new to you, we really want you to, if you feel so inspired, turn your camera on. We would love to see you. You can unmute your mic at any time and share. You can also use the chat. And with this, there's a feature to chat with specific people in the session. So if you get a really exciting networking connection with someone, feel free to reach out to them, and you can private message them, and stay engaged. Show us some love. Show us some feedback with the reactions, etc. And that really helps us know that you're along with us for the learning. Great. Dean's already using his thumbs up reaction there. Awesome. Thanks, Dean. So we wanted to start with an activity that is called a waterfall chat. So this was something that was new to me at the pandemic time, when I was looking for different ways to engage learners in online spaces, particularly in synchronous conversations like this. And this is a strategy that, can we just answer that question for Charlene? Which of those forms links is the correct one? I'll let maybe Katina and Dean have a little explore, and they'll add that in the chat. Thanks for asking that, Charlene. So this strategy it hopes to address the issue that for some learners, and depending on the content that we're exploring, it can be difficult to manage an online chat and to think about our own responses and to read those of others. So this is called a waterfall chat. So we'd like you to take a moment of quiet reflection to consider what your learning goals are for this session, what brings you here to this topic, what interests you, what do you hope to be learning, and type it in the chat, but hold off, don't hit enter yet. And I'll give you 1 minute to do that, and then we're going to let everyone hit enter, and their comments will waterfall. Then we can take a read at our leisure. Okay, so let's just take 1 minute to think about what brings us to this learning. All right, so that is about our time. So let's hit enter and enter our responses and take a minute to look over responses from your colleagues. And if you're so inspired, respond, share. Fleming Colleges. Fleming College, Charlene. Okay, I know someone from Fleming. Alana. And you're same as me. I'm always looking for inspiration from others as well. Yep, connecting with other educators. Craig, thanks for sharing. That idea of students taking charge, right? Excitement, driving excitement in their own learning. Thanks, Lori. Assisting staff and students from Mindy, great. Yeah, and just looking for some new ideas, new thoughts. Oh, you do work with Alana Cowan. Okay, awesome. Small world. Great. Okay, thank you everyone for sharing. Dean, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, I think it's just important to level set this because, as we've sort of navigated the past year and a half and been in many cases forced, and if you're an Ontario educator, you certainly had been forced to incorporate distance learning, online learning, whatever phrase you want. And sometimes we do it apologetically and we say, well, it's not our first choice, or it's not the best, but we're making do, and all of that, that narrative gets shared. Interestingly enough, if you are familiar with John Hattie, and we'll probably reference Hattie a number of times throughout this session, again, for those of you who aren't familiar with him, John Hattie is sort of the researcher of researches. I don't want to say his thing is he takes mega amounts of research and then analyzes all of the research that's been done to determine things like what are the most effective strategies, what are the best things that impact kids. And one of the things that was discovered in this distance learning playbook, by the way, if you are going to be moving into this role, and again, not that our session today is focused on distance learning, but certainly we're going to talk about it. But the idea is that it is not a negative or a positive. The medium by which you are learning is not in itself the deciding factor. And so I think it's important that we try to create as rich of learning experience as possible. And certainly, we may all have preferences in terms of what we like and what we would prefer, but it's just important to know that these are different kinds of things. My very favorite example of learning, of shifting to online learning is if you were, let's say, a polo player, and you've been playing polo all your life, and then someone says, okay, we're gonna change it up a bit. We're gonna play water polo. So it's the same thing. But it really, we know it's not the same. It's quite different. There's different skill sets involved. But to compare the two and say that, well, one is better, it's not really a comparable thing. There may be preferences, but it's not comparable. So anyways, I think it's important for us to have that mindset that we don't think about online experiences as lesser. They're just different, and we have to acknowledge and think about how we maximize those ones. And as we think through these high impact strategies, it's interesting, and I know this is almost going to not contradict, but you're going to see another slide that's been updated since that time. You can see the date on this one's 2009, but looking at like sort of what are the most important factors, high impact strategies, and the high impact strategy that was determined after all this meta research was that feedback is the number one high impact strategy that we can have. And you see student teacher relationships just underneath that one. But that's a big deal. And again, we're going to talk about, obviously, as we talk about assessment, feedback is going to be a pretty big element in that.
Unmute. Okay, there we go. For today, if we asked you to think of one thing that can really engage students in learning, probably could bet that you wouldn't say assessment, but actually the research on assessment provides really great evidence about how assessment practices really promote student autonomy, motivation and learning. So these practices require us as teachers to kind of think about the purpose of assessment in a dramatically different way. And I think in our conversations with lots of folks, and maybe this is your experience, you might want to share that in the class, in the chat rather. But I think when pandemic emergency learning happened, we kind of shifted to, survival mode for a bit. There wasn't a lot of talk about assessment. Those of us who had been already using digital tools for assessment had maybe a gentler shift over to that. But I like what Dean shared earlier, that it's not the technology that's transforming assessment, but it does play a part. And I had a wonderful opportunity to work with Joni Casarano. She has a blog called Harnessing the Power of Assessment. We'll put the link, you'll have the slides, so you'll have links to her blog later. But she was at the ministry and was one of the writers of our assessment policy. So for those in Manitoba and South Carolina, we have an assessment policy here in Ontario called Growing Success. And chapter 4 is this amazing chapter on formative assessment. And Joni and I got a chance to put our heads together when I was there in the curriculum and assessment branch. She, with her background in assessment and also her interest in technology, and me with my interest in technology, and boy, I had lots to learn from her. So what we're going to think about is, what is the transformed approach to assessment? Sorry, Dean? Oh, I thought I heard you. Your mic come off. Okay. So if we think about what transformed assessment looks like, we're going to look at 2 quotes, and then we'll discuss with the document like what that looks like for us and for our students. So here's the first one. And the source of these quotes will be in your notes as well. They come from Pellerin's research and Margaret Heritage for the most part. Here's the first one. And I know Craig's in his car, so I might read this if that's okay with everybody. New forms of assessment promote not only the gathering of evidence of students' learning, but also the engagement of students as active agents in the assessment process. So that's the first one. And the next one is that exercising agency in formative assessment means that students do not simply rely on teachers' pronouncements about their learning status and what they need to do next, but are active in forming their own judgments. So when we think about these 2 quotes, we kind of think about 2 key areas to keep in mind: that assessment's most powerful purpose is to improve student learning, student motivation and autonomy or agency, and that students have an active and important role to play in that process. So what we're going to do, hopefully here, is we're going to switch over, and I'm going to flip over so you can see what the document looks like here. So you should be seeing a big idea here, and I'm also going to put the link to this in the chat for you. Oh, thank you, Dean. He's already done that. So right here, we have 2 discussion points that hopefully we can crowdsource and share our thoughts. And that's one of the wonderful things about our technologies that we can use. We can collaborate over distance like this. So if we look at big idea number 1, what does transformed assessment look like? I've put the quotes again at the top here in case you want to refer to them, but here they are also down below. So think about, if you want to grab a row here and just think about, what do you think in terms of those 2 items? What does that mean for the student, and what does that mean for the teacher if we're thinking of students as active agents in the assessment process and forming their own judgment? So we'll just, maybe 3 minutes, we'll quietly give you time to do that.
These are great, great responses here.
Mhm. Love the
I always think it's
references.
important to
Go ahead,
I always
Dean.
think it's important to also acknowledge, because there's people like us who and I'm maybe everybody here is all in favor of these changes, and the research based and the proven. However, um, what are, like, I'm always interested, like, what are there downsides to this? Like, what are the challenges around this? Because I think one of the challenges that we face is um, students may not want to be, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, but students might not want to be assessors of their own learning because it is more work, it's more effort, and so that's not always an easy sell, I guess, to say that. And I don't know. I think about the differences. Teachers probably have to have a little less. Will have a little less control, and for some, that's a struggle. That's not a necessarily easy transition. So I just like acknowledging the fact that as excited as we are about these shifts, they're not always.
They're not easy. I agree. And so, yeah, I can see, the time it takes, people are mentioning here in the document, right? Time to talk to students about what they've selected. If we're offering them lots of choice, they need to have that initiative, which is kind of relates to what you were saying, that interest in this initiative in the first place, co-constructing. Yeah. I remember my first shift to project-based learning, and in the same way, it wasn't everybody's favorite thing either, because a lot of students had sort of figured out that way to get good marks in school, and sometimes it was memorizing things and regurgitating it back, and it was very different in a project-based scenario. So even
Just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do. I don't want to have to
yes,
think.
yeah. And it's stressful in that time where you have to, be creative. Someone's mentioned that here, the idea of being able to create something, not just jumping through hoops, right? So it can be uncomfortable for us at the beginning. So thank you for sharing all these perspectives. Anybody want to grab the mic and expand on anything that they see here or connect to anything? All right, I'm going to let Anonymous Walrus finish their thought there, and then we'll.
Brenda, I have a thought. I just, from a parent perspective, my daughter, I saw her in her final year, grade 12, virtual at home, and, really keen student. And, I would say, hey, let's look at the rubric before you hand that in. And why don't you self-assess? Why don't you send it to a peer? No, I just want to get it handed in. I've got too many other things to do. And so I think just as educators, we need to be thinking about that as well. If we prioritize assessment and make it part of the time versus just all the content we have to cover, the students might buy into it more and really see it as a powerful way to actually learn. Those are just my
Yes. Yeah. So really good point, and really good point about all that conversation, etc. And it's not an add-on to the content piece, as we'll see in a minute when we talk about growing success a little bit. It is the job of assessment. So thank you for pointing that out. It's got to go hand in hand with the content. Great. All right. So as we said, jump in if you would like to share. Otherwise, let's go on here. I think yeah. So when we think of, oops, I have to take you back to slides. Good idea. So when we think of the first element of transformative assessment, it would be students as active assessors, as you've mentioned quite a bit in your document there. So what does this look like? This means that students have a deep understanding of learning goals and success criteria. And this might look a little different in our shift to online learning, right? We've heard of some teachers who were very skilled with assessment practices in the face-to-face environment, and then it was a bit of a bit of a shock to shift to neutral. So you might have noticed that. Things like single point rubrics have been coming up because they're more open-ended around quality and not always naming things that can go wrong. So that's one innovation that we see coming up. But students really have to know how to use success criteria, what it looks like to reach to learn based on success criteria, and how to provide descriptive feedback and peer and self-assessment. So as you mentioned, that takes time.
So thinking about, I just wanted to share a little bit about my own experience implementing this. And the first time that I really did this, I had gone through a lot of work around formative assessment, and we'll kind of backtrack there a little bit, but I had learned this after I'd left the classroom as an elementary teacher. All these great ideas around assessment. So it wasn't until 2007 when I began teaching online that I could say, okay, now I'm actually going to implement some of this stuff, and it was a wonderful opportunity. So I first utilized this with pre-service teachers. So these are, they were first year, most second year. So these are 19, 20-year-old kids just out of high school, hoping to become teachers, and I'm throwing a lot of peer assessment at them. And it was interesting as I sort of tried to get them thinking about, like, you need to tap into your colleagues, and admittedly, I didn't structure it as well as I might have, and I think that we're trying to share with you a few more ways in which you can do that more. But one quote that a student shared with me is, he said, I think it's the next slide, Brenda, is that it's amazing how much you can learn as a collective when you get rid of the notion that everything has to come, all the knowledge has to come from the instructor. And that was obviously a bit of an aha moment for this young man, and he was close to becoming a classroom teacher, and so it's taken him that long to sort of realize, wow, this is very liberating to think about the fact that there's learning that can happen beyond that. And so just that idea that you set the stage, that we're doing this in that kind of collaborative way. And if you're familiar with the work of Alan November, he always asks the question. He's written a lot of things called "Who owns the learning?" And I think that's the next slide. And that's a great idea around a notion around agency and the fact that this is not your classroom, this is not your education, it's their education, and just reminding ourselves of that. And I think it frees us up sometimes as educators to realize that this is not just about us. We feel the pressure to do what we need to do, and rightly so, but it's their education. But I asked a follow-up question, which was, who owns the assessment? And to me, that is an equally important question, because it's one thing to give ownership of learning to students, but I don't know that we've always been comfortable giving ownership of the assessment to students, because that seems like something, oh no, that's what I control. I'm the gatekeeper of this. And certainly there are things that we have that are that we have to gatekeep, but at the same time, what we're talking about is, how do we shift that so that we don't own the assessment, that it becomes a shared experience, at a minimum, a shared experience. So there's another, I mentioned Hattie before, so there's another, a more recent update to his effect sizes show that, look at the very top one, self-reported grades. And just so that you know those numbers, what those numbers mean, I mean, you can kind of tell by the graph the significance of those top two. But a 0.4, if something achieves a 0.4, that's essentially said, this is a good strategy to use. This will make a difference in student learning. And this one that's 1.44, that's hugely significant, and it makes a difference. And when he talks about self-reporting grades, what that's referring to is there's two sort of concepts around that. One is the idea that students can actually predict how well they're going to do on something. And so they, whether it's a test, whether it's an assignment, whatever it is, that they think about that. But also tied to that is that they actually can take that success criteria and grade themselves and say, like, this is how I line up. And I don't even need a teacher necessarily to give me a grade. I know how well I did because the teacher has engaged me in that process, and I understand that. And back to this notion of peer assessment, in order to make that a really tangible thing, I've always asked my students 2 questions, and my argument is, I don't care if you teach kindergarten or post-secondary, these are 2 questions that I think are seminal if you believe the idea of self and peer assessment and community in general. Is what did you learn from others and what did you contribute to the others? So my students had to provide a narrative, provide evidence of how they learned from others in the class, and also evidence of how they made contributions to the learning of others in the class. And again, without some context, without some conversation, this could be a challenge for students. But when we start at the beginning saying, like, you need to pay attention to who else is in this class, you need to pay attention to what they're doing, we need to give them space and opportunity to share their thinking. And this sort of ties into the idea of assessment as learning. We're going to talk about that metacognition part of that as well, but also making it visible. So now I'm tying in Hattie, I'm tying in a lot of different pieces around that one. And just another little quick tip around how to add a little bit of this is more of a tangible piece around how to make students more assessment of their learning. And this is probably more suited for high school teachers. But it was just one little trick that I did that actually seems to make a big difference. So let's just say, for whatever reason, you have 4 components to your grade. So maybe 25% is a test, 25% is a project, or however it is that I would allow my students to adjust the weight of those different assignments depending on what their strengths were, what their interests were. And so even if it was, nominal, like 5%, I don't even remember what I chose. It wasn't, like this counted as 0, that kind of thing. But I come to that thinking, like, I'm kind of making a bit of an arbitrary decision. Like, why I've just decided that this is worth this much, this is worth that much. So just by giving them ownership of that was just another small way. Again, and I'm all for going gradeless, so that's cool with that. But it was a way to empower them to think about how do they tap into their strengths and how do they take a little bit more control over their learning.
All right, thanks, Dean. So we have our students as active assessors. We also have a culture of learning that is important to address. So we have to think about what kind of culture of learning we would want to have in the classroom. And we talk a lot about this. So there's a lot. It's a rich topic. It involves identity and belonging, the idea of feeling safe and connected so that we can be productive learners, the role of voice and choice and our relationships with our students, as Lisa mentioned with her grade 7 and 8. It's not always easy to unlearn their understanding of what school is and just show me what I need to do, let me hand it in. So, having the support of an educator to be able to take risks is really important. So we have to think about what aspects of classroom culture might pertain to assessment. And one of the researchers really that one of our quotes at the beginning there came from Margaret Heritage, and she breaks that classroom culture down even further into 3 key aspects. So she talks about, and I love how she speaks about this, because she talks about the rights of the child in the classroom, and that they have a right in a community of practice to have these issues addressed so that they can participate fully. And I think one of the things one of our challenges in remote learning is that students in the face-to-face environment overhear us all the time. So they learn lots by listening to us, how we speak to others, how we give feedback to their peers, and they learn from that. And so we have to think about what digital tools offer us that way for them to overhear us in some way. So valuing and respecting the learners and in a strength-based approach, interpretive listening that everyone is doing in the classroom, and providing models for students. And so even all of those things that you see there, like questioning and feedback, growth mindset, I mean, those are huge all on their own, but they make up that part of modeling, what we can do to model good practices. And then she talks about establishing routinized and understood, mutually understood practices, right? So when you think about cooperative learning, you know how many structures that need to be taught carefully, or your collaboration routines in your classroom. And we know how much time we spend on that in our face-to-face world. And so we have to give ourselves a break and know that it's going to take some time too to be teaching these things in conjunction with the learning that we're doing in classrooms, so that we are really building community in learning. And then agency, in that students have really, they do have some real control of choice and voice in the classroom. And I think some of you mentioned that on our first collaboration there in the document, that it has to be really authentic. It can't just be lip service, you know, so that students can make their own judgments. They're going to develop autonomy, and we have to guide them in that way. We have to provide just-in-time levels of support. And I love how Margaret Heritage describes this. So I'll read it to you. She says, the teachers do not, it's a long quote, but the teachers do not advocate their expertise in interpreting what students say or write to indicate their learning status, not giving it up. Instead, we're scaffolding and offering up opportunities for shared reflection in the context of authentic practice of formative assessment. We're inviting students to join us as apprentices in the development of their own expertise. I love that. Inviting students to join us as apprentices in the development of their own expertise. So the only way they're going to get to be able to assess, self-assess, is to practice it, right? Another way you might look at this is the way that Hattie and Nancy Frey and Fisher have when they talk about assessment capable visible learners. I love that. I love that phrase because, you know, I'm big time into visible learning, but, you know, being able to, they say there's 3 teacher moves for us to think about. 1 is to commit to learning intentions and success criteria. 2 is to provide lots and lots of tools so that students really do have choice around what works for them. And then to leverage peers as tutors or partners in learning. And so, you know, what we're really wanting students to do is reveal their current learning status to us. And the more that comes from them, instead of, I mean, I know we talk about noticing and naming the learning in Ontario, but if it comes from students, we know that that's even richer. And then we talk about growing success and assessment repurposed. And we wanted to let you know that we sort of were aware that we would be running out of time. So I think we better just share this, Dean, right? I think we'll just share an activity that folks might be able to do. So in the chat, I'm going to show you a document that we've created. And here's what it looks like. Let me pull it up on the slide. Nope, that's not it. Okay, here it is. Here it is. So you might, if you would like to dig deeper into some of those things that we've just talked about as criteria for us, kind of as educators around transformed assessment, we've pulled out some of the areas right in our policy document. And I think this kind of speaks to the idea that this is not an add-on for us. This is just as important as the content that we're asked to teach. So if you think of the conditions, students having the language to talk about assessment, and that they understand learning goals, success criteria, and how to use that, and that they are viewed in that they're learning in a culture where they're seen as partners, you can take some time, and if we have time for this, we might come back to it and maybe divide up and try it. But take a look at what it says in Growing Success around these 3 areas, because it's right there. And this also could be an activity ready for you if you work in leadership, or you're working with staff and others in your district, as some of you have said you are. you might want to try this with your staff or your divisions as you wish. So we'll just park that for now. All right, and I think yeah, well, there'll be a little bit more on that. So let's go into a little bit more about assessment 4 as and up. Dean? I'm sorry, I'm getting a
Well, I mean, I think again, most of us have probably understand this one. I think the more interesting one of this, and if you go back just to the one before that, Brenda, is assessment as learning. I think, you know, again, the 4 we get being being the formative part, the of being the summative part, but the assessment as learning, that's actually the learning part. That's, I think it's the most challenging because that's really about reflection. That's really about giving kids time to think about, like, how am I learning? What is happening right now? And that's where the struggle comes in. That's where it goes back to Katina's example of her daughter. Just like to hear, I don't have time for all that stuff because, and again, it's not. It's easy to sort of maybe think about why that is. But the bottom line is it's because it's time consuming and it's difficult to always be introspective, and yet we know that probably our best learning comes when we give ourselves that time to do that. So thinking about, like, how do I create more space so that assessment as learning becomes more of a thing. But the next slide just again is just helpful to really think about the difference between the two and sort of the roles that they serve. And I don't even like, I don't like necessarily even thinking of them as good or bad. I think sometimes summative assessment gets a bad rap because it's more because that's kind of what we've traditionally been think that assessment is. It's more that accountability and judgment kind of idea. But those things have their place and their purpose. But again, I think that's just a different thing. That's the difference between a game and a practice. It's the difference between a referee and a coach. I like those two. Maybe my sports background is coming too much into play there, but it's a helpful reminder that our role at this point is to create opportunities for learning when we're thinking about a formative assessment. And again, we want the bulk of the experience of assessment to be in that formative stage, and so that kids aren't feeling that this is a pressure thing or at all. Like, this is like we're learning, and it's good to make mistakes, and it's all of those kinds of other ideas that we have sort of play into that as well.
Yeah, and you know, both are, when you think of assessment 4 and as, both are evidence gathering for the purpose of making decisions to help learning as opposed to provide a grade, as you said, or an evaluation. One where the teacher's using the success criteria to gather information and then make decisions, and then the other as the student can use the success criteria to gather information and make decisions as well. And I always think it's kind of interesting that we talk a lot about teaching critical thinking, and yet when we're using success criteria, that is critical thinking criteria. So we can think about that, and we know that's one of the higher level thinking skills. So we can bring that in and not be sure that we're doing really great thinking there. And then of course in our province, you know, you have to teach all of the expectations. And assess all of the expectations formatively, but your ultimate goal is to then provide a judgment of learning around the overall expectations. So that is our role, although some districts are really thinking about how to do that a little with more input from students more and more. So that's fantastic. So in the chat, let's think about, we know what we want to have students engaged in then in order to empower their learning. We want them actively assessing. We want a great culture of learning. What tools then might you be using right now or wanting to be using that could support some of that? In the chat, would you share some of the things or the ways in which technology helps you? So what makes a great technology tool in your mind? Grab the mic or share in the chat. What makes it really good? Something good to use. It's okay to name your favorites. Just let us know what makes you say that. All right, so Craig, I don't know, versatility. Do you want to say any more about what you mean there? I know you might be.
Yeah. First of all, thanks. I'm not driving anymore, so I can jump in.
I
Session's
assume
been
that we're typing.
no. Yeah. So just to jump in real quick, what I really like about Padlet is just the versatility in the ways kids can share and make their thinking visible, and really tap into the different places of assessment that you guys have been sharing. So there's really nothing physical or digital that they could create that they couldn't share on Padlet. So I really think that's a great tool.
Nice. The other aspect of versatility that stood out for me when I saw you say that is, as an educator, I like a tool that has a lot of bang for its buck. And so with Padlet, you can use it in many scenarios. It's not like you're like, you know, that way there's so much flexibility for you once you learn it really deeply. So Katina likes Flipgrid because she can hear student voice. Oh, so powerful in terms of really feeling that person. Yeah,
I'll just add on to that. I find that it's probably one of my favorite tools. Actually, you can use it just like Padlet, so many different ways, from diagnostics to formative to, but I really find it to be so powerful for metacognition because kids really have that power, the lights in their eyes, you can really see it. And that's when I love to use that particular tool. So just so many different ways it can be used.
nice.
One thing I like just to add, just to build on what Katina was saying, is that idea of metacognition. Because when they're in front of, and if you've ever had to do a flip grid, you probably had to do it, take 2 or 3 takes, right? Because the first one, oh, that's not quite right. The second one, oh, that's better, right? So it's a tool that really supports that. Conversely, and Lisa's talking about Jamboard and Padlet, because they're text-based tools, you know, for those kids that don't, you know, they're not comfortable in front of a camera. Not that anybody really is, but there's certainly kids that for whom that's just a real big challenge. It does provide another avenue. So that's, again, that's when technology is really working at its best, when it's creating different opportunities. And it's just important for us as educators, when we use particular tools, that we still call out why we're using this tool instead of that tool, because it's really easy to get caught up in saying, oh, like Jamboard is a relatively new tool compared to Padlet and even Flipgrid. But Jamboard has some really nice affordances that it allows us to do certain things. And so when I'm using it with teachers, you know, when I say, oh, we're going to go to a Jamboard, and even Brenda and I, when we were planning this, we're thinking about the different tools we're going to use, and we're thinking about why we would use one tool over another. That's just a good conversation. And that's also something that I think it's important for you to share with your students. Why are we using this tool? Because it's just too easy to come across like we're just, hey, this is really cool, Flipgrid. It's cool, might be cool, but there's a reason why we want people to use certain tools. So I think it's just important to think about why and help those that were using it understand why we would use it.
Mm-hmm. Again, giving more autonomy to them so that when they come up to a project that they're going to do, they're sort of hearing you. You know, it's like having a think aloud there. Well, what do I want to choose? Why would I want to choose it? What do I need to be doing right now? And which tool will do that for me? I haven't found the one tool that does everything for me. Yeah, bajillion is a lot though. I agree. Canva too. Yeah. Uh-huh. That is awesome that you can use that with your students. I'm not sure everyone can, but I love that. And you know, Charlene made a good point around bandwidth, and I think that's one of the things. Depending on where we're living, sometimes we assume that everybody has powerful internet. So that is not the case. And we need to be thinking about that and getting lots of feedback from our students, right, around what's going well with them around that and their device, and depending on which device that they're on. I know, Lisa, you had a lot of experience with that with your kiddos this year. Great. Thanks for sharing those in the chat. We're going to have another opportunity to collate a list in a few if we have time. So, you know, you mentioned, I think, many of the things that we were thinking about too. a tool that enhances collaborative processes is bang on. If it provides a variety of ways of communicating, some people say multimodal, that offers a lot of a variety to our learners. It's kind of a universal design piece right away. If it makes thinking visible, that really helps. And that, that archive of the digital piece is really important in terms of formative assessment. Does it allow conversations to go beyond the day? Can we come back to it and reflect? And someone mentioned hearing from students. I think that's one of the most delightful things for me is when you're online with students, those students you wouldn't hear from face to face can come alive and really blossom sometimes. And I am that person. I'm much more comfortable speaking online, and maybe not on video, but certainly in chats and text. Open and flexible. Someone mentioned having it easy so that it doesn't require a lot of learning. It's easy to jump into, and then you can go deeper from there. And then that way you can focus on the learning, not on the tools. So device agnostic. Yeah, I'm not sure if I really captured that in that slide. So that's another one. I guess open and flexible could be considered there, but that's a really, really good point, Lisa, especially since we want students to be using their device of choice. Great. I wonder if we might just leave this one for a bit, Dean, and then, because I'm looking at our time, so I want to have people have a bit of time to browse on their own. So just, we might start to get into some examples, which we're going to share in a second. Even having the ability to put video into our Google Forms, and then having students be able to assess group or themselves. The way that we can capture images if we're in both spaces, face-to-face and online. We can use our pictures to do so, which is very helpful. The way we can use scaffolds or digital writing tools, blogging is a big favorite of mine. So we can really provide students with our sentence starters that help scaffold some of the conversation, reflection, and their own self-assessment. When we think about the things we do face-to-face, we develop a lot of boards, for learning in the face-to-face classroom, but we can do this collaboratively with tools like Mind Maps. Minddomo is one that I think some people have still in Ontario. We used to have it ministry licensed, so I hope some still have it. And Dean mentioned Hattie's visible thinking. One of the greatest resources that I've used, especially in my transition from face-to-face classroom to digital learning, is Project Zero's Making Thinking Visible. So Ron Richards' work. And if you don't have this book, oh my gosh, it's amazing. There's a second edition out now, but they really talk about a culture of thinking and in a classroom, which I think really matches very well with our assessment policy and what we've heard about transformed assessment. The idea of making the thinking of ourselves and our group visible to others. So there's 3 different areas that allow you to jump in there. One is introducing and exploring ideas. And I think we'll be giving people a chance to explore these on their own, right, Dean? So maybe I won't need to unpack this, but there's a video that you'll have. Annie Fetter does a great video on noticing and wondering. I mean, we do KWLs and that kind of thing, but in the book, it's a See, Think, Wonder. It's really powerful strategy. Then there's another category around synthesizing and organizing ideas. One of my favorites, and there's also a video in the slides that you'll get that explains this one, is having people create a headline. So really synthesis of knowledge at a point in time. So that's one thing you can do very easily especially with tools like Flipgrid, Padlet. We're going to provide you here in the slides with instructions on how you might do this headline activity and translate it into 6-word stories. So here is an example of an educator who was learning about deeper learning, and they were asked to create a 6-word story that demonstrates what they think about what the deeper learning definition. So transparent, okay, share your messy learning. So you'll have that. And just some examples of what teachers have done, but just the power of images, that multimodal idea, putting together images and words to document our thinking. And then there's also a section in that book around digging deeper into ideas. One of my favorite changes in practice for me, myself, is trying to not use the word why when I'm asking students, but asking what makes you say that, because it really focuses on providing evidence, which is one of the things that we really want to get to at for our formative assessment. And then I used to think, now I think, is one of the most powerful protocols I've ever used around trying to unpack and uncover the shifts in thinking that students are experiencing. And just as a real goodie for you in your slides, Ron Richards, the folks at Harvard have taken a lot of those protocols and put them online with suggestions of different tools that you can use. So I've been using that a lot lately. So you'll also have that.
So we want to give you time to really take a little bit more time on your own to sort of direct your own learning here a little bit, and reflect on the kinds of things that are going to make the most difference from you. So there's going to be 2 things that you're going to be able to do. So there's this list, and I think what we're going to have to do, Brenda, is give them access to the slide deck, right? I think, is that what you just did?
I just did that, yes.
Perfect. So that's actually slide 60, and all of those links that you see there are embedded. So here's what here's what you're gonna do. So we're gonna give you 10 minutes, and one of the things I know when it comes to doing webinars and things like that, if we were just to leave you a list at the end, the chances of you going back and looking at them might be somewhat limited. And for all the good intentions of the world, it's just tough to be able to find the time to do it. So we want to give you that time now. And what my recommendations would be is not necessarily to try to scan through every single resource that's there, but you've seen the things that we've already. Brenda's working on Access. You'll have it in just a second.
I am. You just stop sharing for a second. It's easier.
You've seen all of the things that we've already shared, and also pay attention to the fact that within those slides, the notes often have links too, so that can be helpful. So don't forget to look at the notes features as well. But slide 60 is sort of a culmination of a lot of very targeted resources around assessment. So there's 3 columns there. You'll see assessment categories, assessment articles, strategies, and then technology. And there's a couple of which have multiple listings of technology tools. So what I'm going to suggest that we do here is, in just a moment, Brenda and I are going to turn off our cameras and just put up a timer for you and give you 10 minutes just to explore. We'll come back in 10 minutes with, and we'd love you to share a couple of things that really you are either going to definitely implement in the upcoming school year, or going to dive deeper in to explore more, perhaps before you do implement it. But some of the most of the titles there are pretty provocative. You can kind of get to where you want to get to, but you won't be able to get to them all. So only pick a couple that you can maybe either something read or dive into. So that's how we're going to do. So 10 minutes to get to work. We're going to shut off our mics. We'll shut off our cameras, and let's see if that works. There's 10 minutes. You can see the countdown there. So we'll see you back here in 9 minutes and 54 seconds. Well, that's 10 minutes. I don't know if that seemed too long or too short.
Well,
How did that feel, folks? Is that enough
I know,
time?
yeah,
It's never enough time, I guess.
I got exploring the choice boards section from Caitlin. What's her last name?
Tucker.
Caitlin Tucker, who I like her work. And so I put a note in the chat there because one of our, if folks here aren't following Tina Zita or Melanie Mulcaster from Peel, they do some amazing things with interactive choice boards there, and I love that. So just a resource to share, and I hope other people will do the same and let us know what they found to be very meaningful. Right? Not a lot
Well,
of
Lisa
time.
and Charlene have already shared a little bit, but I'd love to know if anybody just like found something that they said, I'm gonna do this. This is like, that's always such a good takeaway. Well, it's not just like these are good ideas to think about, but I found a thing I'm gonna do, and it could be something that we shared earlier too. It doesn't have to necessarily be from your exploration time. It could have been something else. But we'd love to have people again. You do you. Chat, mic, whatever works. We'll just pause and read and listen.
I'll jump in. One of the things that I really appreciated was looking at some of those, like the big lists of like 43 techniques and going, oh, I do a bunch of those already. That was just a really nice reinforcement to kind of go, okay, totally on the right track. And then just a reminder to say, hey, I haven't used that one in a while. Should definitely think about pulling that in sometime this week, just something quick and easy.
Excellent. Anyone else?
For me, I just always love the reminders to co-create success criteria with the students to really make it come to life for them and have them have a very concrete target about what they're trying to do. Because when it's in their language, that is helpful. So, and I need reminders to do that. So thank you.
Yeah.
And then I love all the other activities that are being modeled. I just like how you're showing us some strategies with the Google Docs and collaborating that way. And it's a great opportunity for formative assessment to see what our thoughts are as you're going through this. So thank you.
And to build on what you said, Katina, not thinking that success criteria is carved in stone, right? Help students to see it's an organic tool that we're using for our learning, and it's going to shift and change. So yeah, good reminder. Charlene?
Sorry, just unmuting there. No, there was so much. Thank you so much. I'm definitely going to bookmark this and take time going through it. In the 53 ways document, number 4 about the opinion. I find in my college classes, particularly one course, there a lot of them, they always just give an opinion, and I'm always trying to get them to find supporting sources. You got to back up what you say, right? And then you're always trying to say cite and reference in APA and yada yada, and some it's an academic paper and they're just always giving their opinion. So I found it funny that it was like, here's an assignment or an assessment that's like, okay, here's for your opinion, but with the column saying now back it up. Like, even though I say it over and over and over again, there's some that always miss it. And so I'm like, maybe if I just rethought it and reformatted it, made it simpler to say, okay, here's your opinion, but on the other side now, maybe that would improve and help those students that just give opinion pieces to go, okay, I can give my opinion, but now I'm more in my face, having to be accountable for supporting it and finding whether it's research studies with experts on the topic. I think it's going to be more meaningful. So I loved seeing that. Thank you.
maybe our society as a whole could use that little strategy a little bit better. Instead of just giving opinions, have some evidence for our opinions. So not just
Exactly.
for
All
our
of
students.
social
Good one.
media.
Yeah. You know, when I think that's one of the things that I really like about the 1 point rubric, you know, where you'll have the criteria in the middle. Maybe most of us would know what it is, but maybe other people don't. And then you would have a peer assessment piece. People do various things with how you would address the criteria, but one of the things that students I've seen people using is that they ask the students to provide the evidence for what they, you know, to provide evidence for why they think what they did. So it's that question, what makes you say that? And you know, it gives them a really good personal context to be practicing that, Charlene, you know, so that it's another way that they can just be always evidencing what they're going to say. So I think that's a really good point what you make. They don't have a lot of chance to practice that in K to 12, maybe. So we need to step it up a bit and get them ready for you in that way.
Yes, please.
Yeah, an opinion chart's another way to do that, right, Katina? What do I, or and even with KWL, like, what do I know? What do I think I know? Right, adding that piece in, and what makes me say what I think I know. So it's interesting. Gosh, so many media literacy connections there, as Dean mentioned. Anyone else share something? Ah, the hyper rubrics, right? Lee is, you know, teacher librarians are such a gift to us, right? So I happen to knit with a couple of these people, and we get together and share books and patterns and all kinds of stuff. And I get more pedagogical knowledge from that group. So Lee has shared the Cult of Pedagogy blog, as well as more information about hyper rubrics, so that you can give just hyperlink some content in your rubrics to give more students more information or examples. And I think that would be a great student activity for Lisa's grade 7 and 8s to create a hyper rubric. So once they've co-constructed success criteria with you, how could they write with hyperlinks to make it even more engaging? Mm-hmm. Right, I think I'm going to share again, Dean, if that's okay with you. Let's see where we're at here. So I think we're just about at time. So are you seeing a quote? Or are you seeing a flower?
Yep, we're seeing a nice quote on assessment.
Okay, okay, great. So just bringing us back to, hopefully we've picked up some thinking around this shift in the 21st century, from assessment of learning toward assessment strategies for learning, and that we need involvement on the part of students in reflecting how they are learning. They need to be the active participants. They need to be self-assessing, and then they need a voice and ownership in their learning. And they need to share that responsibility with us as teachers. So we hope that you have had some time to think about that today, as well as have some now resources for things that you might be able to share. And also, you know, here we we have a whole selection of these workshops from Dell and ALP and OECM. So you may be seeing people again. And so I hope you've watched the chat and might be noticing folks that you might want to connect with further. Dean, I'll turn it over to you for any last words and to wrap us up. How about that?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things. So I'm going to pop that link in the chat, but we also don't, I didn't forget that. So what we'd love you to do though is, if you could, and I'm sorry, I'm just gonna grab that link so you don't have to. So this link here is, if you could just, I would love you just to click on it and pay attention. There may be some things you have to fill in around those first two, or those four descriptors of the session that'll help you. It'll just sort of help us determine which survey belongs with which offering. But we'd love you to fill that out. And that really does inform us. So one of the things to keep in mind is that we have sessions planned right until the middle of November, but we will be offering more sessions that'll go right to the end of January. And one of the things that'll help us determine what those next sessions are is these kinds of surveys. So we'd love you to fill them in if you would. But before we go, I think Katina is going to spin the wheel of wonderful names and give away a prize or two. I don't know what she's going to do. So Katina.
Yes,
Sure.
so thank you very much. So at the beginning of the session, we did put in that link. I'm going to make sure that I put it in there again. So if you would like to be part of the prize draw, please do enter your name. I'll just give you a moment if you'd like to do that. And I will just watch very quickly to see if we have any new entries in here.
I think, I'm not sure if Lisa made it in there in time, but her custodians were kicking her out of her room.
I saw that. I will enter her name in then. Okay, so going once, going twice. And now what I'm going to do is I put everybody's name on the wheel of names and I'm going to spin for a gift card.
Should I stop sharing so you could show that, or we can hear it spinning?
Okay, Natalie Snow is our winner. And I'm going to do it one more time because the way I see it, like you're giving up your time, your summer holidays. So I'm going to do a couple. Here we go. One more time.
Yay, Natalie. Okay, here we go.
Lee Sanger.
Yay, Lee.
Oh, sorry,
Awesome.
Sanger, pardon me. So you should be receiving a gift card. What we do, just so that everybody's aware of it, it is run through a third-party company. You'll receive an email. So the winners will get that from TK Events, but I will contact you via email. Okay, so congrats to those winners and thank you for participating.
Congratulations,